All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
All right, people, apologies in advance for morphing into my dad during the writing of this radar. You're going to see what I mean in just a moment. So, it was a Silicon Valley love story. Two science nerds, Zachary Schultz-Apte and Jessica Sunshine Richmond, they met at the California Institute for Quantitative Biosciences garage. They fell in love. They launched a trendy poop testing startup called uBiome. Yes, you heard me correctly. uBiome had all the right heavyweight venture capitalists involved. They had backing from Y Combinator, 8VC, Andreessen Horowitz. Both had big stakes in the company. Its valuation soared as high as $600 million. But according to the SEC, it all turned out to be a load of crap. Let's dive deep into the bowels of this story, shall we? So uBiome billed itself as a big disruptor sitting at the intersection of technology and biomedicine. They crowed that they would transform microbiology through their poop and vagina test kits. Started off as a direct-to-consumer play. You could pay about $100, send in some poop, and see your gut flora compared to their database of other microbiomes. But then things got messy. Richmond and Apte appear to have realized that they could grow a whole lot faster and make a whole lot more money if they could get doctors to order the test and receive reimbursements from health insurance. Consumers wouldn't pay thousands of dollars out of pocket for the poop tests, but if doctors ordered them, health insurers would. Or at least that was the premise on which they based their entire business model. According to the SEC, they told investors this was all a sure thing. Doctors would order the test, health insurers would reimburse, and uBiome would become a billion-dollar monster enriching the founders and their investors. There's only one little problem. It was all a lie. So first of all, the tests did not meet the health insurer standards for reimbursement, and the founders just flat out lied about that. Then, to pump their revenue numbers, uBiome started tricking doctors into ordering tests that had zero clinical use. According to the SEC, they would literally resubmit old symptoms from patients as if they were new to dupe the doctor into ordering another new test of an old sample. They billed for tests that were never performed because the test in question had not been proven to work. They invented and backdated documents to try to cover up the entire fraud. But eventually, it all began to stink. The FBI raided their offices, the company shut down, and now the two founders are being charged with conspiracy to commit securities fraud, conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, and money laundering, among other crimes. Looks like they're in deep shit now. Sorry, promise I'll stop. I'll be far from the first to compare uBiome to other much-lauded frauds like Elizabeth Holmes's Theranos. Theranos became a multi-billion-dollar company off of a technology that, according to the Department of Justice, just literally didn't work. Ordinary people thought they were getting real information with scientific precision, and what they were getting back was wildly unreliable at best. It all makes you wonder, is there something about Silicon Valley that attracts a lot of schemers, sociopaths, and high-class cheats? I am always just amazed at the gall of these people. I feel bad if I slightly misstate a stat or phrase something inartfully. Theranos and this couple seem to think nothing of building entire castles of lies just in order to cement their riches and their status in history. And they really don't care who they hurt in the meantime. As it turns out, there's some pretty fascinating research on cheating and on assholes that seems rather relevant here. Two researchers conducted groundbreaking experiments into what personal qualities lead someone to skirt or bend or break the rules. Francesca Gino and Dan Ariely set up games where it appeared to the participant like they could cheat and get away with it. But those games were actually rigged so that the cheating could be tracked the entire time. They found that while intelligence had no bearing on whether someone broke the rules, creativity did. The more creative a person, the more likely they were to cheat. Now, their hypothesis is that creative people are better at talking themselves into believing that what they're doing isn't really so bad, coming up with creative reasons why their cheating isn't really cheating. You can certainly imagine how a lot of the Silicon Valley innovator types coming up with ingenious new solutions and business models, fancying themselves industry disruptors, might fit that bill to a T. But to engage in this kind of scam, you need to not just be a cheater, you also need to be a jerk. You have to have the callous disregard for other humans of, say, someone who would start a fake university promising real estate riches, but really just conning working class people into further indebting themselves, as one hypothetical example. In fact, we've got some research on that as well. Now, not every rich person is an asshole, but in general, the wealthier you are, the more likely you are to be an asshole. And what specifically do I mean by that? Well, things like rampant narcissism, disregard for other people, selfishness, you get the picture. And while no, not every Silicon Valley disruptor starts off wealthy, chances are good that if you're of the class that gets VC meetings, funding, glowing press, you're probably not struggling too much financially. So you got a perfect breeding ground for greedy, cheating sociopaths. And then, of course, there are the investors so bought into the religion of disruption that they're oblivious oftentimes to obvious warning signs. It amounts to a large pool of rich dupes just waiting to be taken in by the next scheme. Put it all together, you've got a fertile ecosystem for both audacious innovation and unconscionable grift. But then again, the line between those two categories, it's kind of uncomfortably blurry. Where's the boundary between the bold, successful hype man able to get investors to buy into a vision of something that doesn't really exist today, and the con man inventing that reality from whole cloth with bold-faced lies? Quite a few of the so-called greats were con men in the beginning who just didn't get called on their bluff. As the old saying goes, behind every great fortune lies a great crime. Get your con exposed prematurely, though, and you're just revealed for what you really are, a shitty person. It's an incredible story because this was another one of these like super hot, on the up, $600 million valuation, all the right people involved, and then it turns out to be a total fraud and con.
Well, they're actually complete liars. And I was just reading through some of the stuff that they did with the SEC complaint, and it's crazy. Because, you know, the interesting thing with Theranos is that most people in Silicon Valley actually didn't give them money. It was mostly like idiot rich people here in the East Coast.
There were a lot of politicians involved.
James Mattis, we don't ever talk about that one. Former Secretary of State was involved. It was like a
there were
Henry
actually a lot
Kissinger.
of like military-industrial complex people.
No, because they thought that it was one of those things that they could be able to use on the battlefield. And again, I actually think both of these stories have a similar corollary, which is that it's really gross because both of them were trying to exploit loopholes in government insurance or defense contracts, or in this point, healthcare subsidies. This is where most Medicare and Medicaid fraud actually occurs, and people trying to game the reimbursement system. And yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense that these two like sociopaths would, and they outright lied to their investors. They like made up complete different schemes and others in terms of what they were doing, and they were trying to take in money from the back door. And they weren't also, this is always the worst part, they didn't care about who they hurt. That was the worst part about Theranos too.
Yes.
They partnered with Walgreens, like real people got blood tests which were wrong.
Right.
And that's the most and they almost did that in this particular case too. But I think it just does show that there's so much like froth in the economy where you can see like there's this new emergence of these investment vehicles called SPACs, which is where you can take a company public with a private investment vehicle. Basically, it's an IPO, but you'll be able to raise a bunch of cash without having to go through any of the regulatory scrutiny. We've seen a massive skyrocketing of that during the pandemic, and I think this didn't go through a SPAC or anything. I'm not saying that it did. It's just emblematic of that whenever there's so much craziness and speculation happening, you're just going to have stories like this. You're always going to have like Theranoses and Ubiomes, and like I'm just curious what the next one is. Like, where's the next WeWork? It's got to be there.
I'm sure it's
somewhere
out there right now. I mean, there's a lot that's interesting about this story. I also think that the whole concept of like the gut microbiome testing thing is sort of like uniquely placed in this landscape of liberal, faux science, like to appeal to exactly like, oh wow, that sounds amazing. So they create this test of kind of dubious usefulness and realize, like you said, that their direct-to-consumer play wasn't nearly profitable enough. They needed to go where the money really was by,
healthcare.
Exactly. Getting into the healthcare system. And look, they're far from the only ones who bilk that system to the tune of millions and billions of dollars. And so that was the game that they wanted to play. And they couldn't quite check all the boxes to get away with their scheme. And the way I think that they started to get caught is that regular people were seeing bills from their health insurers that had these same tests charged multiple times. Yeah. So like they'd get this microbiome test done, one time, and then it would show up on their bill time and time again. They're like, what the hell is going on? I only ordered one of them. My doctor only said I wanted one of these. And so they were conning doctors by resubmitting the same samples and getting the same things tested over and over again, according to the SEC, allegedly, et cetera, et cetera. That's what was going on. But I also think it shows we have all this mythology around Silicon Valley and around like wealthy people in general and these elites like the ones that were involved with Theranos, that they're like super smart and they're super with it and they really get what's going on. but they can just as easily be taken in by that stuff and conned as anybody else. Especially there's a lot of, and this was the thing with Theranos, once you get one big name involved,
more people get involved.
then everybody looks, oh, well, that person says that this is fine, so I guess this is really something that's worthwhile. And then you ignore, because you've got all these validators who have, the right cred in the space, you ignore any of the warning signs of what the real business model is, what's really happening, and that's how you end up in this place.
Here's one of my favorites, that she was named, one of the co-founders of the company was named as one of the innovators by Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop.
Yes.
It's pretty good. That's how you know it's bullshit, by the way.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's a red flag right there. All right, Zachary, looking forward to your radar. That's next.